Good evening, and welcome to a very special occasion. For you see, tonight's broadcast marks the 5th anniversary of Arya Akasha, and at the Ugran urging of a special Summer Devi, we have therefore chosen to record something suitably fitting, as it gets to the heart of what we do here at Arya Akasha, and takes something well known and prominent, in this case the dragon slaying of the striker/thunderer deific, and something less known yet ultimately foundational, in this case how the dragon slaying was actually accomplished, and by whom. And it uses these to explore an area of absolute importance to our shared Indo-European heritage and gods. So therefore let us begin. First layer claims our eulogy, understanding RigVeda, Mandala 8, Hymnal 100, Indra, Vak. Every so often, we come across a hymnal that really deserves a broader audience. In this case, RV 8-100, which details a rather lesser known element to the slaying of Vritra by Indra, namely, the salient role of Vak Saraswati in this conflict. It therefore seemed most appropriate to prepare a brief commentary upon it for our Friday devotional offering post, and in so doing, also begin to meet the enthusiastic requests of some of our readership for more Indra, but also perhaps unsurprisingly Herakles, material as well. So, before I get too carried away with the exegesis, here's RV 8-100, in the Griffith translation, which is bizarrely cited as RV 889 in some editions. It is officially designated a hymnal to both Indra and Vak, and should properly be considered a dialogue hymn, which means that instead of it all being sung as a single poem, various lines of it are almost acted out by particular designated priests who are playing the parts of the relevant gods involved to give a sense of a dialogue. Funny that. Meanwhile, another priest assumes the role almost of a narrator with his lines, providing an expository commentary in his verses, which help to tie the whole thing together, to the right, and keep it cohesively moving. Unfortunately, just which lines are supposed to be sung, by whom, or whom, is a matter of some speculation and disagreement, but we'll get to that in due course. For now, the hymnal. I move before thee, here present in person, and all the deities follow behind me. When, Indra, thou securest me my portion, with me thou shalt perform heroic actions. The food of myth, in foremost place I give thee. Thy soma shall be pressed, thy share appointed. Thou on my right shall be my friend and comrade. Then shall we two smite dead full many a foeman. Striving for strength, bring forth a lord to Indra, a truthful hymnal, if he in truth existeth. One and another say, there is no Indra, who hath beheld him? Whom then shall we honour? Here I am, look upon me here, O singer. All that existeth I surpass in greatness. The holy law's commandments make me mighty, rending with strength I rend the worlds asunder. When the law's lovers mounted and approached me as I sate lone upon the dear sky's summit, then spake my spirit to the heart within me. My friends have cried unto me with their children. All these thy deeds must be declared at summer feasts, wrought, Indra, bounteous lord, for him who sheds the juice. When thou didst open wealth, heaped up by many, brought from far away to Sarabya, the Rishi's kin. Now run ye forth your several ways. He is not here who kept you back. For hath not Indra sunk his bolt deep down in Vritra's vital part? On rushing with the speed of thought, within the iron fort he pressed. The falcon went to heaven, and brought the Soma to the Thunderer. Deep in the ocean lies the bolt with water compassed around about, and in continuous onward flow the floods their tribute bring to it. When, uttering words which no one comprehended, Vash, queen of the gods, the Gladdener, was seated, the heavens' four regions drew forth drink and vigour. Now whither hath her noblest portion vanished? The deities generated Vash the goddess, and animals of every figure speak her. May she, the Gladdener, yielding food and vigour, the milch cow Vash, approach us meetly lauded. Step forth with wider stride, my comrade Vishnu. Make room, the Eos, for the leaping of the lightning. Let us slay Vritra. Let us free the rivers. Let them flow, loosed at the command of Indra. In quotes. Pretty stirring stuff. And it only becomes more profound when it is considered in light of its both Vedic, as well as its broader Indo-European context. Now the broad outlines of the slaying of Vritra are pretty well known, and form perhaps the best known Hindu expression of the striker/thunderer deific versus the demon dragon of the waters. It's an Indo-European mytheme, which is itself almost certainly the most prominent and readily identified of these ancient underlying archaic mythic templates of our ancestors, finding somewhat close co-templates in pretty much every Indo-European descendant culture. Thor against Jormungand, Tarhunt against Illuyanka, and of course Herakles against the Hydra, which this hymnal has an intriguing direct point of resonancy with, as it happens. These are some of the better known instances, or there are of course numerous others, including some which aren't actually of this typology, but instead are of a somewhat parallel one wherein it is the Sky Father who carries out the appropriate action of demon slaying. Consider, for example, Brihaspati's orbital bombardment of Vala, just to be sure, or Zeus against Typhon, who also winds up buried under a mountain. But more upon that perhaps some other time. The Vedic presentations of Indra against Vritra represent the oldest recountings of this myth that we have available to us, and preserve many features within them that appear to have dropped out, or at the very least become significantly distorted and or de-emphasized in other Indo-European cultures' renditions of the same tale, which does not mean that the Hindu renditions are completely consistent upon these matters simply by virtue of age. As is often the case with scripture, each hymnal which covers or which draws from the episode in question presents things from a slightly different perspective and a somewhat different purpose. Some details are to be found partially or entirely omitted, simply because they are not so relevant for the hymn's intended purpose. Later Hindu scripture goes even further and makes occasionally quite pointed conflationary leaps. For example, the Mahabharata's recounting of the incident, which appears to have melded Indra's fight against Vritra with the Shatapatha Brahmana's explication of the slaying of Namuchi by him, or the Srimad Bhagavatam's presumably deliberate Shaivite-style description of Vritra, in what I can only surmise must have been the Vaishnavas pursuing a sectarian propaganda barrow of their day. As applies the Vedic evocations of the combat, these serve three closely interrelated purposes. First, to glorify and to pay homage to the gods via extolling their achievements. Second, to explain how something was achieved and preserve and inculcate a broader lesson around it, both for immediate audience as well as for the civilization at large. And third, to further immanentize, via the Alearian eternal return, the positive outcome of the original mythic deed out into the world around us, i.e. the sacral recollection and semi-re-performance of the event in question further amplifies its echoes and embeds the patterns of its occurrence into our reality, which, when it comes to the Vritra slaying, may include facilitating the ongoing rain cycle against the threat of drought, for example, as an expression of underlying fundamental cosmic law which has been defended against the demonic disruptive onslaught. It is clear to see how all three objectives are intricately interwoven in this hymn, for it hails the mighty deeds of Indra and Vak in slaying Vritra, in no small part by describing the manner in which this is actually attained, through pious offering to Vak and appropriate sacral conduct, adherence to the mandate of Vritra, the cosmic order. And therein contains the lesson for the culture which has produced and performed the hymnal, all of which is performed as part of a sacral offering itself, thus engaging in the aforementioned eternal return of the events, and therefore re-facilitating the reimmanentization of the principal outcomes under discussion that are held therein. There are several important points yet to be made upon that last element, including the significantly important Indo-European warding against the depredations of demons by reminding them of a time when even some of the greatest of their number were hurt really, really badly by our gods, so as to dissuade them from bothering us any further. But we shall leave those for another time. Instead, let's take a closer look at several of the verses of this hymn, and then how these relate to the aforementioned classical co-expression of the same myth in the combat of Herakles and Aeolus against the Hydra. Hail, Hydra Slayer. Now, as I have said, this is a dialogue hymnal, and there is some controversy over just which lines are meant to be voiced by which gods or other roles to the right. The recent Jamison/Brereton Oxford translation and commentary proposes that much of the exchange is actually between Vayu, the wind god, a figure significantly coterminous with Nordic Odin, between Vayu and Indra, at first interspersed by, and then supplanted with the lines of narration ascribed to a Vedic priest acting as an officiator of proceedings. This interpretation is, by their own admission, uncertain, and not exactly secure, in no small part because it hinges around an incredibly complex level of ritual structure symbolism that they have imputed onto the hymn. How complex? Well, in order to make things work with their preferred structural interpretation key to the 3 daily soma pressings, they have the composer, or the performer of the hymn, imitating an unnamed singer in dialogue with Indra, and the singer is in turn imitating Indra, or some other eyewitness of the mythical scene. Meanwhile, their main argument for ascribing to Vayu the opening lines of the hymn is that there is a certain degree of resonance with a Brahmana commentary episode wherein Indra and Vayu have a dispute over the division of the spoils of war from the dragon slaying in question, which, again by Jamison and Brereton's own admission, is a problematic interpretation, as it places the aftermath of the death of Vritra at the exact opposite end of the hymnal to the combat actually being initiated, among other elements that are exactly the wrong way around for this to truly be the case. Other efforts have been put forward from time to time, many of which appear to overlook some rather obvious, in fact remarkably obvious, features in pursuit of increasingly abstract and emptily theoretical flights of academic inquiry. So enough of those. Here's how I interpret it. The hymnal all up is one in which Indra is granted aid and availment in making ready to take down Vritra. It is implicitly made clear that several elements have contributed to his quite literally striking success in the ensuing combat, one of which is the assistance of the enigmatic figure of the first line, which cannot be Vayu, per Jamison and Brereton's speculation, because the granting of the appropriate sacral portion to this figure is what precedes and makes possible Indra's ensuing heroic actions and mighty deeds. It is not a division of loot after the conflict. Instead, it is something familiar to many an Indo-European hero, whether god or human, the act of sacrifice and pious offering to a powerful, also in this context divine patron, who shall then aid her chosen champion in the fight to come. Who might this patron of the gods be? It is Vak. As we can see in her own most magnificent hymnal, the famed Devi Shukta, Arvi Mandala 10, hymnal 125, my favourite RigVedic hymnal as it happens, wherein precisely this pattern and typology is extolled for our benefit, specifically including, interestingly enough, a mention for her supporting of Indra, as well as directing and empowering the divine war effort more generally. Something also found in Arvi Mandala 6, hymnal 61, line 12, open quotes. She must be invoked in every deed of might, close quotes, going in motion with all the gods, but being the first to merit worship amongst them, right there in the Devi Shukta. It's an exact parallel, in other words. This definitely explains the first line of the combined Indra-Vak hymnal. I move before thee, here present in person, and all the deities follow behind me. When Indra, thou securest me my portion, with me thou shalt perform heroic actions. And so, therefore, just as the first line is Vak speaking to Indra, as well as, while looking directly at the camera, as it were, speaking also to the assembled audience for the reenactment of the rites proceedings amongst humankind. For we, too, are able to accomplish the heroic actions through the assistance, the guidance, and the augmentation of Vak. So, too, is the second line, Indra replying to Vak. Open quotes. The food of myth, in foremost place I give thee. Thy soma shall be pressed, thy share appointed. Thou on my right shalt be my friend and comrade. Then shall we too smite dead full many a foeman. And while some have attempted to suggest that, given the role of Vishnu in the last line of the hymnal, the ally Indra is hailing in line 2 must therefore be likewise be he, I again have a different interpretation in place for this, as after all, we already know from elsewhere in the RigVeda that Lady Vak, Saraswati, has the honour accorded of killing Vritra. She, along with Indra, is hailed as Vritrahan, Vritragni to be more precise, in Arvi Mandala 6, hymnal 61, line 7. Griffith himself translates this line as, Yea, this divine Saraswati, terrible in her golden path, foe-slayer claims our eulogy. And while various commentators have suggested that it is meant to be interpreted figuratively, stating Saraswati's immense power being equal to that other Vritra slayer who is better known for the mighty deed, and or simply rendering it as the smiter of resistance in the context of the riverine Saraswati's having an unstoppable flow. It should come as no surprise to find that I do not believe Saraswati as Vritra slayer can be excluded in such a manner. It simply fits too well in light of what we know from the other RigVedic hymnals, as well as subsequent scriptural sources upon the matter. By which I do not only mean Arvi 8:100, but also those in which the holy act of dragon slaying is carried out quite explicitly via an act of prayer, of pious speech, which brings forth the Vajra to slay the fiend. Vak Saraswati is quite directly pious speech, divine speech, and we also have other Vedic material showing her in action, potentially assisted by the Ashvins in some cases. For example, Jatapatha Brahmana 12.7.3, in which the imbuing of Indra's Vajra, so as to ensure it is capable of bypassing whatever magical warding that the foeman has at the time. This connection is also supported by the other major figure who engages in mythic acts of dragon slaying in the course of the RigVeda, Brihaspati, Shiva Rudra Orin, the Sky Father, the consort of Vak, who pointedly makes use of her power in these combats, as do the war priests who march and chant with him to similar purpose. So Indra, having given Vak her proper and prime share of the sacrificial offering, as is mandated as proper in Arvi 10, 125:3, energetically affirms to her, "Thou, on my right, shall be my friend and comrade. Then shall we, too, smite dead full many a foeman." Moving on to line 3. "Striving for strength, bring forth a laud to Indra, a truthful hymn, if he in truth existeth. One and another say, there is no Indra. Who hath beheld him? Whom then shall we honour?" End quotes. The third line is on the face of it slightly more surprising, as it seems to depict the Vedic priest carrying out a rite of worship and empowerment for Indra, despite being unsure that Indra even still exists, and setting up a conceptual space for another saviour deity to step forward unto the breach, if necessary in his place should he not. It is a note of despair rather than atheism, and to my mind would appear to recall the interregnum following Indra's fight with Vritra's elder brother Trithurias, during which Indra goes into hiding and recuperation in a place unknown even to many of the gods, who attempt to temporarily replace him during his absence with an elevated human, Nahusha. This therefore sets up the triumphant re-emergence of Indra in line 4, wherein he is at no pains to express humbleness. Open quotes. "Here I am. Look upon me, O singer. All that exists I surpass in greatness. The holy law's commandments make me mighty. Rending with strength, I rend the worlds asunder." In quotes. Cometh the hour, cometh the god. And in response to the dire circumstances that the Brahmins and gods have raised the alarm about, we find Lord Indra quite literally answering their prayers in person, and seemingly raring to go. However, while we might perhaps have thought that Indra's trying ordeal that had preceded this would inculcate some more immediately obvious humility, I do believe that even alongside the somewhat understandable boasting, there is clear evidence of just such a moral dimension to the Indra who emerges there. It is contained at the juncture of the second and third quarters of line 4. Open quotes. "All that existeth I surpass in greatness. The holy law's commandments make me mighty. As a certain work of fiction once put it, we are mighty because we are right. We are not right because we are mighty. Vile the hour when that reversal becomes our credo." Indra's emphatic declaration that he surpasses in greatness all that exists is, strictly speaking, rather wide of the mark. But he has been divinely empowered, not only by Soma, but also by Vak, who, as Shakti, more than exists. Vak, who is, per Sayana, and my own Vedic theology, Rita herself, expressed in universe. It is Rita, cosmic order, that has granted Indra his greatness here, and to a pointed purpose, that of the defence of order's immanency in this universe against the dire demon-dragon disruptor threat thereto, as symbolized and reified through Vritra's interruption of the water cycle, and its consequent ensuing direly deleterious impacts upon the worlds of gods and men. Dharma rakshati rakshitaha, indeed. That is to say, Dharma protected protects. Indra's significant strength here is his unassailable moral position, something not so clearly found in his previous martial conquest against the Brahmin Trithurias, which was implicitly a significant opposite, on grounds that Brahmanacide, Brahmahatya, is a severe crime precisely because it is a harm against the immanency of the supernal in our world, by killing one of the perceivers thereof. See my works in the Of Bhairava and Balance series for more details upon their principle, and various relevant examples of the phenomenon in action. Line 5, meanwhile, swings the focus back to Lady Vak, with her declaring that she had heard the pleas of the pious folk, and gods for relief from this rapacious reptilian scourge currently bedeviling them with its nuisance. Open quotes. when the law's lovers mounted and approached me, as I sat lone upon the dear sky's summit, then spake my spirit to the heart within me, my friends have cried unto me with their children. End quotes. We can tell that this is plausibly Vak, due to the symbolic resonancy with, once again, the Devi Shukta, in which Vak is depicted as being found alone on the world summit, or in around the liminal zone at the edge of the universe, also referred to as the waters, beyond which lies Brahman / Adi Parashakti unveiled. The waters, in a way, are a veil, although so too we might fairly suggest is Maya, the illusory tapestry of reality. But more upon that perhaps some other time. The last part of the line also resonates most strongly with, and presages, the latter scriptural accountings for the Devi appearance of Shakambhari, wherein Devi, responding to the beseeching prayers for relief from another demon-caused drought, appears to fight the demon Durgamasur, both ending the drought and consequent famine, while re-establishing proper piety, through the resumption of Vedic rites in the process. An act as applies the former, perhaps facilitated by the rivers of blood from slain demonic armies that also ensue. Lines 6 and 7 are relatively straightforward, and have the priest, who has taken the role of the narrator, hailing Indra for his successful completion of the slaying of the adversary, Vritra, the he who kept you back, and liberation of the riches ill-gotten by the latter, so that they may re-enrich the Rishi and the natural world around him. Line 6, open quotes. All these deeds must be declared at Soma feasts, wrought Indra, bounteous lord, for him who sheds the juice. When thou didst open, wealth heaped up by many, brought from far away to Sarapa, the Rishi's kin. Line 7. Now run ye forth your several ways. He is not here who kept you back, for hath not Indra sunk his bolt deep down into Vritra's vital part, in quotes. However, line 7 may also entail an instruction to the narrator's priestly colleagues to begin the pouring forth of the Soma libation. Its dual symbolic saliency here, as both the waters, which have been freed by Indra in the mythic flow of time that is the successful culmination of that myth, as well as the Soma, which is brought to Indra by Shayana the falcon, as mentioned in line 8, which should canonically happen earlier than the liberation of the waters. It is one of the essential actions required in Indra's preparation to fight and to kill Vritra. Lines 6 and 7, therefore, represent a curious and convoluted contributor to the eternal return theme of the hymnal and its accompanying rite, as these are simultaneously the words of the then contemporary priest, hailing the past mighty deed of Indra, which has already been completed, as well as reaching backward across the mythic time flow of the reenactment in order to facilitate the essential steps necessary for the next phase of the reenactment, which is yet to be completed. Coming to that now. Line 8. On rushing with the speed of thought, within the iron fort he pressed. The falcon went to heaven, and brought the Soma to the thunderer. End quote. Line 8, as aforementioned, is a smooth reintegration of the expected progression of the mythic events in question, detailing Agni as Shayana, the falcon who brings the Soma to Indra in some versions of the myth, doing just exactly that. The Soma's source point in heaven is an interesting emphasis in light of the rest of the hymnal's conceptry, and serves to further underscore Indra's role as an empowered champion of the cosmic order, acting with the ultimate sanction. A theme continued in line 9, wherein we find the Vajra being stored and empowered in order to be made ready for Lord Indra's use. Open quotes. Deep in the ocean lies the bolt with waters compressed round about. and in continuous onward flow, the floods bring their tribute to it." Close quotes. There are multiple manners in which this again deceptively simple sentence may be read, contingent upon just which of the several, not necessarily exclusive, additional conceptual or scriptural elements one chooses to bring to bear upon it. Bearing in mind the well-known archaic Indo-European belief in the sky also being a kind of sea, it seems relatively clear that the ocean in question is up above, which means that echumerically, the waters which are rendering energetic tribute to the Vajra housed within may be read as akin to the manner in which the convection cycle raises up water in vapor form to produce the storm clouds, which then rain down lightning from above. This has an obvious and alluring sense to it, but I believe that other and more directly scripturally attested interpretations are also relevant. These include the later material around the sage Darichi, offering up his spine for the Vajra, following a process involving various sacred waters coming together. But also, perhaps more resoundingly, the Vedic accounts of another confrontation of Indra with a worrisome foe, namely his fight against Namuchi. I shall not go into any great depth of detail here upon that matter, except to note that Namuchi, as with Vritra in various tellings, had a whole suite of specific immunities to harm, which necessitated Indra et co. to get creative in their congealing of a weapon with which to strike him down. To quote the Shatapatha Brahmana commentary upon the matter, Indra had sworn that he could slay Namuchi, open quotes, neither by day nor by night, neither with staff nor with bow, neither with the palm of my hand nor with the fist, neither with the dry nor with the moist, close quotes, which of course meant that Indra attacked Namuchi in the pre-dawn twilight, when it is not really day or night, and by using a weapon which was neither wet nor dry, for it had been made of foam by Saraswati, Vach, working with the Ashvins. Why this matters, to put it more succinctly again, is due to the manner in which the deep waters, which form a liminal space of sorts about the universe, are hailed as being the home of Devi Vach. This fits in with the notion of Rita as Brahman, existing above and beyond the universe, yet emanating into said universe, in particular as Vach, the sacred speech, an idea which shall become rather relevant for us in the hymnal's next line. What it means here is that the weapon the Vajra made use of by Indra is in effect a congealed force of cosmic law itself, and has been quite literally heaven sent to him from this outside space, this outside sphere, via the waters and via the direct intervention of Vach Devi, just as was also the case in Indra's encounter against Namuchi, wherein Saraswati Vach, operating with the Ashvins, notably most usually for their mastery of secret potions such as the Soma, a liquefied eternal essence, are likewise prepared a supernal armament for him. Indeed, there is a deliberate double resonancy to this verse, as it is also possible to read the extrapolation as effectively having Vach as the divine weapon in question. This is quite deliberate, and echoes the parallel expression found for the concept elsewhere in the RigVeda, including the strongly coterminous incidences such as Brihaspati's combat against Vala, Vritra's brother, and of course the Devi Shukta line around giving active animate force, through sound, to the bow of Rudra, open quotes, so his arrow may strike and slay the hater of devotion, close quotes. The notion of the continuous onward flow, in which the floods their tribute bring to it, would therefore also denote not merely the congealing of the relevant weapon, but its seriously escalating empowerment, its charging, if you like, as the supernal currents amidst the Akasha bring together such energies as are required to make the bolt, the dread weapon, truly unstoppable. The limitless, unbroken flood, being how Saraswati, Vritra Slayer, Vritra hand / Vritragni, is hailed in RV 661, immediately following the Vritra-smiting epithet, along with acting via a thunderous, tempestuous roar, accompanied golden path, perhaps akin to lightning. This also helps to explain the next line, line 10, open quotes, when, uttering words which no one comprehended, Vach, the queen of the gods, the gladdener, was seated. The heavens' four regions drew forth drink and vigour. Now whither hath her noblest portion vanished? However, in order to make best sense of it, we shall have to dip into the Jamison/Brereton translation. The preceding one was the Griffith. Open quotes, when speech, saying indistinguishable things, sat down as gladdening ruler of the gods, she milked out in 4 streams nourishment and milk drinks. Where indeed did the highest of hers go? The metaphor being carried forward here in the 4 streams is better explained when we get to the next line in which Vach is compared to a cow. Hence the 4 streams are of that most vital and nourishing importance, milk. Metaphorically speaking anyway. What the milk metaphor actually stands for is, indeed, metaphorically speaking, as in, it is the 4 clades of speech, 3 of which correlate to the 3 worlds of this broadest phase of Vedic cosmology, with the 4th representing the unknown speech, which is beyond the comprehension of any other than her, and perhaps her consort, Brihaspati Shiva. This secret speech is what may make the actual ritual empowerment of the Vajra work. It is the meditation and the emanation, the transducing of the power from beyond the water's veil into the bolt of thunder, with which he shall slay. And thunder is exactly the right word for this weapon, as thunder, after all, is the low, loud, roaring sound. Vakam garjit lakshanam. Thunder, with the characteristics of divine speech, but with a figurative meaning of indistinct speech, that we can tell is, well, a speech, but which we cannot make out exactly what it is saying. It is one of my absolute favourite theological principles, and as you can see, most directly relevant here in explicating what is going on with that vanished 4th part to the holy speech. In terms of the potential Indo-European correlates for such a concept, one of the more obvious ones comes to us from the Nordic conceptry, wherein, in addition to the well-known runes of man, there are also held to be another 4 groups of runes revealed, each specific group of sapient beings. The gods, the elves, the dwarves, and the Jotun, which may match up with the 4-fold speech division caused by Vayu in Shatapatha Brahmana 4.1.3, wherein only one of 4 divisions of speech, allotted to 4 clades of beings, is intelligible. Although it is worth noting that this is therefore exactly the opposite way around from what is referenced in RV 8.100, wherein it is only one of the 4 streams of Vach that are beyond our perceptive grasp. A further research shall be necessary to see if this division of the world division of the empowered communication, speech and runes, the engraved patterns and surfaces rather than sound waves, whether this coterminity is present elsewhere. One of my former associates at the Institute has also pointed out to me the existence of a most unusual spell song in the Havamal, verse 163 in the Bray translation, open quotes. An 18th I know, which I ne'er shall tell, to maiden or wife of man, save alone to my sister, or haply to her, who folds me fast in her arms. Most safe are secrets known to but one. The songs are sung to the end. End quotes. Given that Odin is Brihaspati, Vach's partner, it would seem logical to ponder whether there may be some degree of conceptual resonancy herein. And Brihaspati you could also translate as the husband of the sacred speech in question quite directly. But more upon that perhaps some other time. To return to RV 8.100. Line 11, open quotes. The deities generated Vach the goddess, and animals of every figure speak her. May she, the gladdener, yielding food and vigour, the milch cow, Vach, approach us meetly lauded, The cow symbolism we have already briefly parsed, although it may be prudent to observe that this also recalls the relatively standard figurative language employed to talk about the wife of the Sky Father, which of course Vak is. The first line resonates with the conceptry found prominently in later Shakta mythology around the appearance of Durga, wherein the gods, threatened by the otherwise insurmountable buffalo demon Mahishasura, engage in a summoning forth of the great war goddess Durga. Durga, of course, is also Vak, and the parallels with various of the other instances wherein Devi is called upon in this manner to solve a demon problem that the rest of the pantheon is unable to handle ought be immediately obvious. For example, the Shakambari episode I've mentioned, which also has resonancy with the food and vigour which she brings, the vigour referring to the energy necessary to fight and defeat the foe, as well as that gained from the material sustenance provided once nature is back in balance and the drought or famine is over. And further, the ability to actually eat, digest, and unlock the energy within food, via Devi, as we found attested in RV 10:125, line 4. In addition, of course, to the more metaphysically and mentally nourishing, i.e. to the spirit, nourishment of the divine speech, the proper piety without which men are not really men at all. In terms of how the gods bring forth the mighty Devi Vak, the answer is not immediately described, although we can obviously infer rather strongly that it entails the standard ritualine formulas for asking a deity to come and be present for a sacral rite in their honour, as that is exactly what is referenced in the immediately preceding line of the hymnal. The notion of the god goddess as an honoured guest of the ritual's officiators is a well-known pan-Indo-European concept, and it should come as no surprise to find out, particularly in this instance, that just as we humans carry out such conduct for the gods too carry out such conduct for this most august figure amidst and yet beyond even them. It is also, again, as is directly stated in the line in question, an instance of visiting royalty. The line around creatures of all types, speaking her, helps to evince her importance to all of creation, all of the worlds and their inhabitants, and may also carry the connotation that as the threat posed by Vritra is literally existential, so too are seemingly all creatures capable of speech engaged in the petition of her to arrive and to avail. This notion of speaking Vak also concords with the gods summoning her in another way as well. In the latter, Devi Mahatmayam, account of Durga's manifestation in order that she may slay Mahishasura, the three great gods, later joined by others of the pantheon, effectively do just that. From the mouths, Vadana, which can also refer to speaking or singing, of Shiva, Vishnu and Brahma, come forth great projections of Tejas, radiance. This matters because there is a prominent co-identification of terms for light and speech within the Sanskrit conceptry. Arka, for instance, refers to both the flash of lightning and also to a prayer, a hymn, sacred speech. In other words, the proper formulation and enunciation and purpose found directly coterminous with the lightning weapon which Lord Indra is about to employ, or, for that matter, the lightning arrows of Lord Rudra let fly with the humkara of the Devi-empowered great bow, Pinaka. I would also argue that Bahasa, a spoken language, also a Saraswati theonym, from Proto-Indo-European bech, to speak, resonates this pattern mytholinguistically, given the parallel derivation and evidence for Bahasas, meaning light, inter alia, a word of slightly different pronunciation, which I'm not going to try and mangle once again, which is from another Proto-Indo-European bech, which effectively means to shine, glow, light. So therefore, as we can see, there is a fundamentally consistent typology between these various instances wherein Devi has been called upon by the gods, built around not only the occurrence of pious rites and offerings to her and for her, as we saw initially in line 1, but also upon the notion of speech, prayer, Vach indeed, as the essentialized ingredient in her manifestation, which also helps to explain the nature of the weapon and the boon possessed by Indra for his fight against Vritra, which we shall be coming shortly to, and also at the same time aids in demonstrating, the fundamental coexistence and coherency of later Hindu mythology and theology with the archaic Vedic foundations of same. This light or fire conceptry, apparently so necessary in order to accomplish the dragon slaying of Vritra, finds its echo in the Greek myth of the Hydra's slaying. I shall not consider this in great detail nor depth here, having already done so at some length in a recent early article. Hail Hydra Slayer, on the mythic combat of Herakles and Athena, Indra and Vak Saraswati, against the demon dragon of the water. But suffice to say, the presence of Athena alongside Herakles in the oldest versions of the Greek myth that we have available to us is no accident, nor is the provision by Athena of the insight making use of fire in various renditions of it as the means via which Herakles is able to circumvent the Hydra's supernatural protections against being slain. It seems evident that the Greeks preserved in various coherency certain Indo-European myths and conceptry which find their expression and consistency in the Vedic canon, yet which must near certainly have been more ancient in their origin, broader in their pervasiveness through the Indo-European peoples and mythology, and deeper in their intended interpretation and meaning than what one would perhaps presume if the most popular baseline elements of an immensely strong figure, armed with a club and perhaps setting things on fire as a problem-solving tool, were taken at face value and in exclusion. This brings us to the concluding line, phrased by Jamison Brereton as, open quotes, "Comrade Vishnu, stride out widely. Heaven, grant a place for the mace to proper part. We too will smite Vritra. We too will give leave to the rivers. Let them, unleashed, go at the impetus of Indra." And, perhaps more resonantly, by Griffith, open quotes, as, "Step forth with wider stride, my comrade Vishnu. Make room, Dieos, for the leaping of the lightning. Let us slay Vritra. Let us free the rivers. Let them flow, loosed at the command of Indra." End quotes. The wide stride which the speaker of this last line imperates Vishnu to make is likely correlate with the famed 3 steps of Vishnu that find salient mention elsewhere in the Vedic canon. These are usually interpreted to correlate with the 3 worlds, one stride of Vishnu being sufficient to demarcate the distance across one world's boundary to the next. Although in this instance it is perhaps somewhat uncertain as to whether the stride mentioned is intended to refer to all 3 steps and therefore all 3 worlds, or whether the singular is made use of deliberately to connote that it is but a single world which Vishnu must traverse in advance of the Vajra's thunderous discharge against the demon dragon that has stolen the water. The rivers referred to, which shall once more flow freely once Vritra their captor has been dealt with. Given the next portion of the line, wherein is the heavenly sky and the sky father, Dieos, who is asked to stand clear, the conventional imputation would be that it is the single stride encompassing the heavens which Vishnu is urged to make. Presumably, likewise, given Vishnu's RigVedic position proximate to the highest point, param thereof. For the same reason as Dieos being requested to get out of the way and give Indra space to fight from on high. The final line has invited further debate on a number of points, the most prominent of which being who is intended to be speaking, who is the other, i.e. non-Indra, member of the two, the us. The former question is usually thought of to be straightforward. Indra requesting two relevant sky deifics to give him space in which to fight, followed by the declaration of intent for what he is about to do, as applies both smiting Vritra and releasing the rivers from their captivity. However, there is an issue with this, in that it would effectively have Indra speaking in the third person, a not insurmountable obstacle to the interpretation, to be sure, but a puzzling one, given the I of line 4 is usually held to be Indra speaking in the first person. To me it sounds more like the voice is giving orders to the first two gods mentioned, i.e. Vishnu and Deus, to get out of the way because the bolt is about to come down from the waters at the apex of the world, i.e. where Deus is, per RV, Mandala 10, Hymnal 125, line 7, and proximate to Vishnu's station, as I've mentioned. This is in a manner perhaps like the meteorite utilized as the Vajra by Brihaspati in various Vedic hymnals. This would be the leaping lightning. Followed by the same voice telling Indra which is about to happen, and that which he is about to ensue. As for the latter question, upon the identity of the two, there are several possible answers, many favour it being Vishnu, and there is certainly an RV hymnal wherein Vishnu is referred to as the friend of Indra, close allied, RV1, hymnal 22, line 19. But despite Vishnu's citation earlier in proceedings as making way via the wide stride, I do not find that instantly persuasive. It has occasionally been suggested that the honour may belong to Vayu, given Vayu's attested role following Vritra's slaying in confirming that the latter is actually dead. Yet that does not seem quite right, as Vayu does not usually play a role in the actual killing itself. There are various RigVedic hymnals in which Indra is accompanied by Brihaspati in order to go dragon slaying, including of Vritra particularly and specifically, so that would certainly be a possibility. Although the lack of otherwise attestation for Brihaspati within the bounds of this hymnal, the mention for Deus notwithstanding, would appear to cast some doubt as to whether that could be what is meant here. Now I think another solution is more plausible. Juan wherein, immediately following the god's summoning of goddess Vach, via their pious conduct and ritual and sanctified speech, Vach does indeed appear, and in just such a manner that the first thing the Rudra does when he appears is also an expression of what he is, i.e. the roar. So too, when Vachdevi arrives and becomes fully, actively apparent, having already been there in spirit, welcomed with the invocation, and the inviting to be seated in the honour seat of the sacrificial rite that has been thus far unfolding, well, what is it that she does? Well, she does what she is. She speaks. Or, as she herself puts it in RV, Mandala 10, Hymnal 125, line 5, I verily myself announce and utter the word that gods and men alike shall welcome. In the Griffith translation. A declaration which is perhaps rather more clear in its imputation in the Janasvami translation. Open quotes. I speak this myself, which is liked by both gods and men alike, end quotes, which the next portion of RV X 125.5. This asserts her ability to bestow immense power to her chosen champion. And in the next line of the Devi Shukta, Vak declares, arouse and order battle for the people, Griffith translation, although others phrased the line a little differently, and instead placed the emphasis upon Vach's direct engagement in combat. The actual Sanskrit wording to the verse would more directly render as make war or do battle, and there is a perhaps useful broadness of meaning to the English idiom of to wage war, wherein both soldiers directly engaged in fighting and the generals who command them are covered by the ambit of the term. Both senses are applicable to Vach's role, although in the instance under discussion, In the concluding line of RV 8100, what is being set up is a channeling of Vak's power by Lord Indra, which places the latter in the more overtly front-line combative position. Still, it would be difficult in the extreme to come up with a better and more immediately striking RigVedic manifestation of the concept of Vak's rousing and ordering battle for the divine purpose than her issuing forth the order, capital O, because this is of course also Rita. Step forth with wider stride, my comrade Vishnu. Make room, Dieos, for the leaping of the lightning. Let us slay Vritra. Let us free the rivers. Let them flow, loosed at the command of Indra. To phrase it quite directly, I have come to believe that this line is actually Vak's. That it is the direct answer and reply to Indra's earlier declaration, I should say, in line 2, that, open quotes, thou on my right shall be my friend and comrade. Then shall we too smite dead full many a foeman. The confirmation issued after the proper and appropriate acts of piety and ritual have been undertaken to honour her, and the weapon which she alone can make manifest, indeed is her manifest, has become charged and is ready to leap like lightning down from the waters which swirl beyond even on high. That the we too, or the us, of line 12 is Vak and Indra acting in concert to slay Vritra. That whether we are viewing Vak as having a more supportive role, providing the essential armament, marshalling and directing particular divinities in order to ensure her strategy's success, or whether we are taking things further and additionally accepting the inference that Vak is also the weapon, this is a case wherein the accreditation for the deed should be shared. Hence, no doubt, why this hymnal is titled and dedicated to Indra and Vak together in the first place, a choice which has occasionally puzzled analysts who have instead insisted upon endeavouring to minimize Vak's role in the hymnal, and then wondered why she gets such prominent billing in the subject explicatory title, etc. I am aware this has been a seriously lengthy and heavy-going read, not least upon my voice, perhaps ironically, yet given the singular, salient significance to our mythology and our theology of both the myth of the striker/thunderer against the demon dragon of the water, and the immense power that is the sacred speech, I felt that it deserved nothing less. Foeslayer, after all, claims our eulogy. Jai Mata Di. And that brings us to the end of that impressively lengthy reading of that particular article. Now, as you can tell, this is a theme which has been absolutely integral, both to much of the work which we've done over the past few years, the past 5 years in fact, and also my personal theology, which doesn't always come through quite as strongly as I might like in our work. The understandings which we've parsed in this particular piece, I've obviously left quite a lot out, because I've covered it elsewhere. But we find the exact same areas being referenced, not only in the later Hindu conceptry, which we've briefly looked over here, but also amongst the Greeks. And there's quite some quotes in recent articles I've put up about the dragon slaying, in which Athena does exactly the same thing for Diomedes and Achilles as what is being done for Indra here. It's a consistent theme. There are also expressions of it which match up with the Nordic conceptual sphere, and you can read all about those in the relevant pieces looking at the role of Freya, Frigg, and other such divine female facings, the wife of the sky father deific in the Nordic understanding, which you can find elsewhere, as I've said. Now that brings us up to an hour of me speaking, and as you can tell, my voice is not quite up to continuing much further, nor is my mind, possibly because it's 3:30 in the morning here as I'm recording this. I was inspired and excited to actually go directly from waking up, Vak in another sense, in sort of a Germanic dialect, directly from waking up to recording this, by a particular special divine personage who made it most directly apparent that she was very eager to see me actually do this post-haste. So to her, and her divine plan, which forms the relevant theonym, I hope you've enjoyed this particular tribute to the inspiration which has guided and empowered Arya Akasha these past 5 years, and the inspiration and direction which has led myself and yourself into the presence of the divine. Jai Mata Di. Hail to the goddess who is speech.